positions. Okay, so there will be a 3-minute introduction by each candidate. Then there will be prepared questions. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes to respond. And at the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes to summarize why they want to the position that they're going for. I'd like to introduce our timekeeper, John Sullivan. John, can you give a wave? There he is. So he will let you know when it's time to go. And we ask that you please observe that, because we do have a lot of questions and it's going to be a little tight here as far as not having this go on too long. So
just to let you know, I have a 60-second, 30-second, and then time, and then I'll call time.
Thank you, John. Okay. Again, I don't know if you all heard it, but the meeting is being recorded. And now I'm going to hand you over to Suzanne Ryan, who is also on the Hilton Neighborhood Association board. She is a local educator and a retired South Orange Maplewood teacher. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Mary. Welcome, everyone. And on behalf of Hilton Neighborhood Association, we would like to thank all of the candidates for throwing your hats into the ring. We very firmly believe in the strength of our schools as paralleling the strength of our communities. So we very much value the efforts and the time that is given by our Board of Ed members, and we thank you for throwing your hat into the ring. So with that, we would like to have you introduce yourselves and let us begin with candidate Rodriguez.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Rodriguez. My family and I moved to Maplewood in May of 2020. We have one child in the district. She's 3 years old, enrolled in the district's universal pre-K program. I joined the race because I was interested in learning more about the town and developing relationships with my neighbors. And most importantly, I feel strongly that the school board and I, as a parent, are mutually responsible for children's success on the board. And the role of the parent is the single strongest factor in launching kids into success beyond the district. So here I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us now go to candidate Cuddle.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the Hilton Neighborhood Association for hosting tonight's forum, and for my fellow candidate colleagues for being able to step up in service for our community. My name is Shannon Cuddle. My pronouns are they and them. I currently am in my first term serving on the Board of Education and serve as first vice president. I also have the honor to serve as vice president of the Essex County School Board Association as elected by my Essex County School Board colleagues, and also serve as the Essex County representative to the NJSBA Board of Directors. I've been an educator, leader, and a civil rights advocate for over 20 years and driven innovation in education, civil rights policy, social justice advocacy and programming with a background in equity, inclusion, and policy that has led to successful statewide, national, intersectional education, LGBT, and civil rights initiatives. Over the past 2.5 years I've been on the board, I have a proven record of service showing my deep commitment to equity and inclusion with a lens on students first in our district and our beloved community. I've fought for inequality, empowered students by centering student voices, perspectives, and advocated for all students and families, especially our most marginalized and most vulnerable students. I've worked to guide our district and board to examine all policies, procedures, and practices through a lens of equity and inclusion, excellence, and student achievement. I'm working around the issues of equity. I've spearheaded us from an equity lens to reimagine our policy, programs, handbooks, and procedures, student well-being, to prioritize and creating systems and care for student health and wellness, such as providing and supporting free student counseling for HMI, and brought in cultural competency training for our board members, our staff, and for central office, as well as champion anti-bias, suicide prevention, and LGBT cultural competency training, which starts this year. Tackled food insecurity, championing food insecurity for our district, and universal lunch and free school summer school lunch program. Being able to uplift student voices and our student leadership, to making sure representatives have been able to have more voice at the table with our Board of Education, and in many other ways within our district, including within communication and within our leadership, being able to try to lend a voice for better collaboration and movement building for our community together. Through this lens, I have been working in the school district and our board to be able to work on creating groundbreaking policies and procedures over the past 3 years that have helped create the foundational momentum to help move our district forward. As a school board member, I've also made the commitment to be able to go beyond my school board training mandated by the state to become a certified board member, and also meet the requirements for a ambassador board member to ensure that I'm being my best self as a board member of the community.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Can we move to candidate Telesford?
Hello, I'm Dr. Kwame Telesford. I'm running to serve on the Board of Education. I'm a lifelong resident of South Orange, and I'm happy to say that I grew up in this community. As I've been canvassing around town, I find great pleasure in meeting residents, old and new, and feeling a great connection when I find out their children attend the same schools that I did. I attended Clinton School, South Orange Middle, and Columbia High School. After that, I went into the field of biomedical engineering, where I obtained a PhD, and I currently do research using biomedical engineering to understand how our brain works. When I consider my academic career, I've always felt this school district provided me with a great foundation. And it's one of the main reasons why I moved back here and plan to raise a family here with my wife. My main reason for running is that when I moved back here, I learned that our district was changing in a way that brought equity and access into focus. And this is a vision that I support, as I believe it is important for us to provide students with a great education. When I think about the goals the district is pursuing, I recognize them as big picture ideas with great complexity, and to achieve these goals requires a strong collaborative team. When I think of that team environment, it reminds me of scientific research and the collaborative spaces I work in. Working in these spaces has given me an appreciation for using data-driven and evidence-based approaches to understand difficult topics. I'm running this year because I believe my experience can be an asset to the board. I'm running on a common ticket with Arun Badlamani. He's a passionate and committed parent with 2 children in our district. Both Arun and I share a vision of a school system that provides a path for all children to succeed. Tonight, we hope to share our vision and gain your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let us move to candidate Whitleader.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you so much to the Hilton Neighborhood Association for hosting the debate tonight. And thanks to all the candidates. Hopefully we can see each other in person again soon. But I'm running for the Board of Education because I believe that our children and community deserve better. We need a district that works for every child, and I'd like to share what that means to me. It's creating a rigorous curriculum that is current and meets every child's needs. It's closing the achievement gap that we know has plagued our district for far too long. It's continually investing in the professional development of our teachers. And it's finally taking action to develop a comprehensive security plan that makes sure every student is safe while on school grounds. The single inspiration in running for the Board of Education has been all of our children. In my 5 years of living in Maplewood, I've volunteered my time to coach Girls on the Run at the Jefferson School. This year, I'm a coach at the Maplewood Middle School. And separately from that, I engaged with our Columbia High School Student Council when I was hosting a local community event and thought it would be a good idea to bring high school students into the fold. I presented the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a nonprofit organization, to our student council, and students came out that day to participate in the event. And I would say it was very inspirational to have them there. These experiences, along with the current issues our children are facing, have motivated me to run. In June of last year, I did apply for the 6-month position for the Board of Education, and I did not get that job. I've spent the past several months meeting with as many people, whether it's parents, students, current board members, past board members. I even have gone as far to meet with the president of the Board of Education in Milburn to understand governance from their school district's perspective. Why am I doing all of this work? It's threefold. First, it's because I care about the children in this district. Second, it's because I need to learn and understand where our challenges are, how we can improve, and where the gaps exist. And last but not least, it's because I want the opportunity to serve on this board, and I needed to prove to all of you that I deserve the opportunity. I'm motivated by our students and the desire to make education better for all of our children. As a mother of 3 children, the oldest going into kindergarten next year, we will be in this district for the next 17 years. And I would be honored and humbled to serve the South Orange and Maplewood community on this board and to play a transformative role in the lives of all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, candidate Badlamani.
Good evening, everyone, friends and citizens of our 2 unique towns. It is my honor to be running to be on the Board of Education of South Orange Maplewood School District. I grew up in Mumbai, India, where I observed poverty firsthand and how even a few years of primary education can make a significant impact on a child's life. Since then, I've been extremely passionate about children's education, first as a volunteer and then as a member of the board of the nonprofit Asha for Education. I'm a strong proponent of high quality public education. Both my daughters have been in the school district since kindergarten. My older one is a sophomore at Columbia High School, and the younger one is a 6th grader in South Orange Middle School. Over the past decade, I have been a proud Girl Scouts dad. I am the cookie distribution coordinator for our entire district of over 60 troops. My wife and I have volunteered at school by celebrating math on Pi Day, rocket science and lightsabers on Star Wars Day, coding during the hour of code, and during our famous Indian festival, Diwali. I want to make sure that we continue to offer all children a path to success in whatever they choose to do, be it academics, athletics, arts, or even creating a whole new field of study. I want to simplify the process of getting educational resources to those in need. For example, special education and English as a second language students. So as an immigrant myself, I also want to help all parents navigate sometimes unfamiliar education system. My vision is for us to be a national blue ribbon school district. These schools not only have the state's highest high school graduation rates, but more important in my view, is that schools have made the greatest advances in closing achievement gaps. I have the privilege of meeting many of you while canvassing in your beautiful Hilton neighborhood. I love that you have unique events like the Porch Fest and a very vibrant Springfield Avenue. I want to thank the Hilton Neighborhood Association for organizing this debate and allowing me an opportunity to share my point of view and the priorities if elected to the BOE. I'm very proud to be running with Dr. Kwawi Telesford. He is an extremely passionate local resident who got his PhD in biomedical engineering and is doing brain research. So looking forward to your questions and hoping to give you good answers. Thank you.
Thank you. And as a Girl Scout co-leader in our community, I thank you for doing all those cookies that we so lovingly distribute. So thank you.
My pleasure.
So candidates, we have 8 questions, and as Mary shared, we put names in a bowl and we picked out at random, making sure, however, that everyone would have a first shot to go. So randomly we would pick out, and that is how we came up with the order. So it was definitely names in a hat. Our first question for the evening. Last year, with COVID starts, stops, misinformation, miscommunication, no communication, and lack of transparency between the Board of Education and the community, how would you propose and plan to rebuild trust between staff, central office, the citizens in the community, and the Board of Education? For question number 1, candidate Rodriguez, would you please begin for us?
Well, thank you for your question. Undoubtedly, the last 18 months have been very frustrating for all of us. And when I moved to Maplewood in 2020, May of 2020, we were in the thick of the pandemic and dealing with lockdowns at work, at school, challenged with caring for our children and being responsible entrepreneurs or professionals. So I understand and share everyone's frustrations. On the topic of trust, I believe strongly that trust is built on communication and transparency. And it seemed to me that everyone overnight became almost a medical doctor or medical expert. When I do my research, I try to go to the most reputable sources and try to get as close to the information as possible. For example, today I was looking at some of the statistics for COVID in New Jersey, and we've had about 1.2 million infections with 28,000 deaths. I think it's important for us in 2021 to look at how we're performing today on the backs of vaccinations, which were over 70% in our towns, PPE, distancing, seating plans, and all of the risk management practices that we've put in place. What we can't do is revert to being overly conservative, because the unintended consequences, which we lived through in the last 18 months, are pretty clear to us. So to build trust, we have to commit to keeping schools open and keeping schools safe, and also providing alternative learning modes for families that are not comfortable or ready to have their children learn in person. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to candidate Telesford.
Okay, when I consider communication, I think the most important thing is being consistent. When we talk about the starts and stops, that's partly because we just have to get behind an idea that we're going to stick with. When it comes to the district, they can start to create policies that will govern how are you going to communicate with the public. And we should provide some sort of framework that we will give to the public to show, here's how we will communicate with you going forward. But I think the most important thing when we're looking at communicating is looking at, I guess, our website and taking all that information and distilling them down into, you can say, bins that will show you, distilling it into bins that will provide us with, I guess, help us articulate what our concepts are. Because if the district can talk about its vision, then it should be able to distill that down into, I guess, a digestible manner for the public.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Candidate Vadlamani.
One thing I would really want to echo on what Kwavi said is that communication must be clear, concise, and we should not be flip-flopping between two different, things. So one of the problems that I saw during the pandemic was that there was a decision made to start at some point, and then it was moved and so on. So I think it would have been better to come up with a policy that said, we are going to start whatever in 6 months. It doesn't, I don't think the decision itself matters as much as making sure that it is done consistently. The second thing that actually happens with a lot of communication from the district is that, I see it more like, it's almost like typing a Google search. Everything is available on the web somewhere, but it's very difficult to find it and navigate it. And the third thing is that we need to ensure that all the stakeholders are present at the table when decisions are being made. We cannot have one party deciding that, oh, we cannot get into this, and come up with a unilateral decision. So obviously we know all the stakeholders are, the parents, the administration, and the teachers. And facilitating all this should be the Board of Education. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
Thank you for the question. So we are in an unprecedented time right now, right? We're still in a global pandemic. It has not gone away. We are not back to normal. We are back to a somewhat of a new today normal. And we are all still living through that. All of our staff, all of our families, our administration, all of us as a collective community, we are still going through the trauma of our collective, in this collective pandemic. And during that pandemic, we have learned things from 19 months ago that we're much better prepared for now. Things since day one of the pandemic hit and we had to shut down what we thought initially was for 2 weeks, and it ended up being much longer than that. Things were fluid in flux based upon the information that was coming in at the time from the state, from the health department, switching gears to the governor's emergency orders and other. But one thing that is clear is that we did not get communication right. I was even frustrated with communication as a board member and as a community member itself. But what some of the things that we have gotten right is ensuring that now, due to push as a board member for myself, we have things like the COVID dashboard now on our school district website. We also have information that goes out in our newsletter. I have spent my time also during making sure that my fellow board colleagues were informed on what's happening in best practices during COVID, and having a seat on the county and the state level with NJSBA allowed me to be able to be in the middle of the pandemic to give a voice for SOMSD on the state and county level during the pandemic. And that was something that was so vital to be able to be a part of those conversations, to hear best practices, what's working, what's not working in other districts, being involved in those conversations, and what our teachers, our students, and our families need. But we have better communication that we need to do with a focus and a lens on that, ensuring that all of our students in our community, that we're communicating in ways that are accessible, right? We're talking about multi-language, also making sure that accessible for those of other abilities, making sure that we're communicating in ways that move us forward.
Okay, thank you. And candidate with leader.
Thank you. I think we need to spend some time to be self-reflective and think about what caused the miscommunication. Was it poor communication? Was it poor planning? Obviously, we've seen enrollment decrease significantly, the lowest levels we've seen in 15 years. And arguably, with the people that I've spoken to during my canvassing, I think those numbers are going to be even lower this year. And what has been cited as a reason for that is the lack of trust and transparency. And going back to what Will originally said, that starts with communication. So I think that's critically important. And I think we could be more proactive in our approach to meet issues head on. So I know, for example, the notion of eating outside to prevent the spread of COVID, that didn't come from the board or their district. That came from parents who showed up at a board meeting to advocate for that so that we could keep students in schools for as long as possible. These are things that I think that as a district, we should really be thinking innovatively and creatively to ensure that our students can be in school and learning. And I know, and with parents that I've spoken to where there is an exposure, there's been a lack of communication as far as what's the protocol, how is that child going to learn while they're at home? And there's been ongoing back and forth to get information, and it just doesn't seem to exist. So why isn't this process seamless? And I think that's something that we could work on. We had the whole summer to do it, and we can still course correct and fix it.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Okay, deep breath. Question number 2. One Board of Education member resigned a few months ago, citing lack of respect and professionalism from her fellow board members. Published emails corroborated her concerns. How will you improve civility and respect to create a stable, better functioning, and respectful school board? And candidate Cuddle, as the only incumbent candidate, with your answer, could you please speak specifically to what you have done to address these concerns? For all other candidates, please specify what you specifically would do to address this issue. And our first person to address question 2 would be candidate Whitleader.
Look, anyone who watched the board meetings last year throughout the entire year saw a lack of civility that existed, just a lack of respect and the inability to just treat others the way that we all deserve to be treated. And I think that if everyone on that board, and this is something that I personally, as a tenant that I hold true to, is leading with empathy, I think that goes a long way. We need to put ourselves in the other person's shoes to understand maybe why they're reacting the way that they are. I know that takes a lot of work and it's hard to do, but there needs to be a mutual understanding. I think if the board could create some shared vision and shared goal around the goals and how they can work together, that could hopefully, in team building, maybe bring people closer together. But I do think that there's an opportunity. I personally have spent my career in business development. I've worked on teams. I've had to engage key stakeholders across, the firms that I've worked for. And it's really important that we work together, because otherwise we're never going to get the results that we're looking for. And I thought there was one more thing, but I think that's it. I think we all just need to sit back and understand why we're here. It's not about us as individuals. We're here because of the students, and that should always be the #1 priority.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
Hi, thank you for the question. Well, since my time on the board, I have very much believed in collaboration and that all voices should have a seat at the table. And in fact, worked collaboratively in communication and outreach with my fellow board colleagues to keep them updated and informed in best practices, be able to create bridges, to create those relationships, to foster better understanding, team building, and collaboration, and asking and seeking for their input, and also at the same time helping build better understanding between each other. When I see the board as a whole, I see the board as a function of a unit of one, of a collective of 9, with 9 individual voices that all have an equal seat at the table, and that we do not operate in silos, but we operate united as a board of education, as a board as a whole, and that we, in the work that we do, have to be demonstrative in reaching out and crossing those bridges through ourselves and each other to be able to foster not just better communication for us during the horseshoe, but to be able to have better communication and collaboration off the horseshoe as well. And creating those foundational bridges for that is so key in order to do team building and to be able to come together as a voice on the board. I know that in my time on the board that I have really invested in ensuring that I'm creating relationships with all my board members, coming from a place of active listening, coming from a place of wanting to treat others how I would treat myself, wanting to be treated myself with respect. And it was a focus on learning. We all come from very different backgrounds and lived experiences, part of our beloved community. And all of those contribute to us being on the Board of Education as elected by our community members. And all of us having a seat at that table is so vital in order for us to be effective as board members.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Telesford.
So when I think about, I guess, communication, it's all about, I guess, teamwork and working as a collaborative team. And how do you build a team? One thing we can say about the board is that everybody is passionate about what they believe in, but how we talk to each other is very important. If I were on the board, one thing I would advocate for would be to use nonviolent communication as a basis for how we communicate with each other. In that, you're going to either be speaking without finger pointing and criticism. At the same time, you're also going to be listening without finger pointing and criticism. Doing so allows you to actually build connections with each other. And then that allows you to actually have the empathy that Caitlin mentioned. Because you're working as a team and you will have disagreements, but the important thing is in your disagreements, you have to also be willing to listen to your fellow board members. And I think that's the main thing that we have to look at. Listen to each other and be able to speak and listen without finger pointing or criticism.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rodriguez.
Thank you. First and foremost, let me say that one of the reasons that I got into this race is because I read an article about bullying amongst board members and factions. Let me say here in front of all of our neighbors, I will not stand for bullying. I don't like bullies. I won't be bullied. I won't allow my colleagues to be bullied or my children to be bullied in the district. So I think that's important. Second, communication is the key. And the most important communication is what the listener does. So by that, I mean, we need to be open to all diverse views, because I can tell you that looking at these meetings, I can tell there are a lot of ideas, but we need to bring the best ideas from all sides to come up with the best solutions for our students. The way I would approach this, and I think what's important here to drive stability through the board is, one, being prepared, two, being respectful of people's times and deadlines, and also just looking at the other board members through the lens of humanity. These are your neighbors. You're going to see them at the supermarket. You're going to see them at Trader Joe's. Your children are going to see each other either in school or in camps. When your term is up on this board, you will be in this town and you will be accountable to your relationships with your neighbors, okay? I have conversations every day and I make decisions every day that affect people's jobs, careers, and livelihoods, families. I do that with deep respect and empathy, and I plan to do the same thing on the board and to make decisions that encompass the entire district, because I have to look at you, my neighbors, and the parents in the eye when I'm walking down the street. So thank you for that question. I think it was really important, and I encourage other parents that are like-minded to get involved in this race.
Okay, thank you so much. And candidate Vadlamani.
Currently, I work on Wall Street, I work at a bank, and as you would expect, it's extremely hierarchical. The big boss comes and says, do this, and you don't really have a choice of saying whether I want to do it or not. You do it. But a board is very different. A board is a panel of peers. It's almost like, going back to the round table, the Knights on the Round Table, like where there is no one boss, and you cannot actually walk up and give orders and make things happen. The way you make things happen is you work as peers, you influence each other, and you convince each other. And one thing I can tell you is that I've worked in both situations. I mean, obviously I work in a company right now, but previously I worked on the board for the nonprofit Asha for Education, where you can only move things forward by influencing people. And one very important thing is, at least for me, is evidence-based reasoning. I am willing to be convinced if you can tell me, should be a good reason why the idea that I am holding is that incorrect, or the idea that you're holding is correct. So that I think is extremely important here, is that at the end of it all, I mean, I kind of echo what everyone else has said, is that we are neighbors, first and foremost. We are parents in this community, and we will continue to do that even after we get off the board. So peers, parents, neighbors, and as long as we keep that in mind, I think we'll all be okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to question number 3. The Board of Education recently extended the superintendent's contract and provided an increase in salary, while giving the public only a few hours to review and comment. This was also done at the end of the meeting. In your estimation, is this good policy? And candidate Vadlamani, you're up first.
So one thing a little difficult about giving an answer to this is, I know no more about this than most other parents do. I'm not privy to any past board meetings or decisions that they may have made, or what information went through the process. But the few things that I know are that there was a salary cap that was put in by the previous governor of New Jersey. And when it went away, they merged the base salary and the bonus together and put it into the contract. Now, is this the best time to do it? I don't know. I mean, maybe it was because we just got through the pandemic and maybe this is a good time to do it. Or on the flip side, one could always argue that why don't we wait till things get back to normal and then do it? So again, not knowing any of those decisions on all that information, it's very difficult to kind of give you an answer on this. But one thing I can tell you is that any of these decisions that are allowed to be publicly aired should be done publicly. I mean, I know that there are a bunch of laws that prevent you from talking about policy matters in public, however, simply we think they are. But we should be focusing on making sure that our parents and other stakeholders are in the know as opposed to being taken by surprise. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rodriguez.
Thanks for your question. I'm actually in the midst of performance reviews and budget planning now. So these conversations are taking place at my job daily. So salary cap aside, let's talk about performance. Right? When I'm evaluating employees and making recommendations for salary increases, I'm taking into consideration performance. Did that employee achieve plan or achieve their individual development plan? I'm looking at the market and I'm looking at whether or not if I lose this employee, would my business fall apart? So I don't know if market forces or retention played a significant factor in the decision to give the super a raise. But I can tell you that from my perspective, I questioned why this was necessary and why it was necessary now. The other piece I question is why would we take away the variable compensation component that is an incentive for good performance? Why would we put that into the base comp and give this employee very little incentive to achieve? So this is how I go about evaluating employees and how I would go about evaluating the super. And since none of that information was made available, I'm not able to comment on whether or not that raise was deserved, but I hope I've given some good insight into how I would go about this if I was sitting on the board. Performance, plan, goal, market, and retention.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Whitleader.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that this is a pattern of behavior that we've seen from our current Board of Education, where they're rushing to decisions, not taking the time to really think through this, giving public an opportunity to weigh in on some of these things. This happened this past Monday when there was a moratorium on suspensions, and that was presented to the board over email over the weekend, and it was a first read on Monday and ultimately passed as a resolution without going to a second read. I think that whenever we're making a decision in this district, we need to engage all key stakeholders in those decisions. We need to provide transparency. The inability to be transparent is what is causing so many community members to distrust what's happening in the district. And I just don't know why we would rush to make very important decisions in this district if we have the time to think it through and be really thoughtful about it, and make sure that our community members have awareness to the issues too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
Thank you for that question. So as the current incumbent and current city board member, our superintendent is my employee. So I cannot speak to specifics about my one employee in public, but I can speak to the process points here. And the Board of Education addressing the superintendent's contract under Governor Christie, who put the salary cap for superintendents, was a burden for school districts. We couldn't really recruit high quality superintendents due to the salary cap. And school districts would use merit paid to create the compensation package in order to retain and recruit superintendents. Where Governor Murphy signed into law and he took office and removed the superintendent's salary cap, that allowed superintendents across the state to New Jersey to be able to ask to reopen their contract for prevailing wage. And that is what Dr. Taylor did. He was eligible to do that last year, actually, when the law went in effect, but he waited until, because we were in the middle of the COVID crisis, to now. And during part of that process, it did go through a review process to the county superintendent, where it was required under law to have a 30-day hearing public notice, which did go out to the public. And then during our meeting of updating the superintendent's contract, we were required to have a public speaks just on the contract. I don't believe we actually had any members of the community who gave public speaks that day in regards to the contract. But the superintendent's contract itself was to move towards being prevailing wage and customary to other school districts across the state of New Jersey, and even now, yes, are doing that, reopening superintendent's contracts to meet the new state mandate. And that is all that it happened here as well. It was in Dr. Taylor's right to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Telesford.
I guess when I look at this from a policy standpoint, I really can't speak on that. But as we know, the salary cap was removed, and many superintendents across the state did ask for new contracts. But I think as a board, one of the goals is to have stability. When I was a student here, we had one superintendent, it was Pete Hiroshak. And I saw him from all the way from beginning in Clinton School, all the way through Columbia High School. And the board right now has had many interim superintendents, and now we finally have what we want as our permanent. So I think our goal is to maintain stability, because that allows us to have leadership and a vision so that we can start tackling the issues that the district faces. So I think that's one of the most important things, is to recognize that we need stability and leadership, because that allows us to give our children stability in their education.
Okay, thank you. Our next question was just referred to by candidate Whitleader, and it is this. On Monday night, the Board of Education voted to make a sweeping policy change to eliminate student suspensions for a year without putting the resolution on the agenda or giving the public any opportunity to see the resolution, let alone comment on it, and then without any consideration for input of teachers or building administrators. Do you agree or disagree with this type of leadership practice? And candidate Cuddle, you're up first.
Thank you for the question and giving me the opportunity to explain a little bit more background of what happened with that particular resolution at Monday night's meeting. I will start to caveat, to me, it was not a overall leadership decision. Oftentimes there are pieces of policy or resolutions that are become hand-carried items for various reasons, including typos, last minute legal review. And so that is not uncustomary to happen on the Board of Education. But the resolution that was passed on Monday night did have all board members were sought for input, and the district leadership as well, including our solicitor, did also weigh in on that as well. So we are at a really particular time right now because of COVID and the pandemic, where our students are re-entering our buildings, but our students are also facing challenges. And within those challenges include making sure that our students are not receiving more punitive measures by re-entering into our school buildings. And so what this does is not cease suspensions. What it does is it still has suspensions for tier 3 and 4 in the code of conduct, but what it does is add the layer of Dr. Taylor being able, as superintendent, be able to review and approve those suspensions, because during the first 14 days of this school year, we had 4 student suspensions. That is extraordinary, large number of suspensions in the first 14 days. And in the first 6 weeks, we have had an enormous amount of HIB. HIB stands for harassment, intimidation, and bullying that has happened within our buildings, what has happened in our community, our students. And having punitive lenses do not change behavior. And that is why we use this method to ensure that restorative justice practices were being implemented and not coming from a lens of making sure that we're using the threat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Let us go to candidate Vadlamani.
So again, I mean, I'm not privy to any more information than all the parents here are. I've heard that there is a moratorium on suspensions and everything gets referred up to the superintendent. But I'd just like to push back on this, this questioning. And what I want to talk about is that, traditionally, if you go back to, again, corporate America, right, a new CEO comes in, and the first thing the new CEO does, or a team lead or whoever, is blame the old CEO. Oh, all those are different problems. So I definitely do not want to participate in that, in the sense that I am assuming that all the people on the current board are smart, passionate people, no different than me or any of the candidates who are there. And without having any more information, I'm not going to say that they made a bad decision or a great decision or push back on that, right? So that's where I'm going to leave it, because I have no more information than this. I mean, I've heard about, yes, you say that, they were given very short time to do that. Maybe not, I don't know. But the decision-making process should involve all peers. And I'm hoping that process is being followed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Telesford.
I think what we should be focusing on is what is the purpose of the suspension or the moratorium on suspensions. And that is because we want to have a restorative justice framework throughout all our schools. And so that's why they're assembling this task force with teachers, administrators, students that will all have their input here. But I think the main goal is that we know that exclusionary and punitive punishments do not help students, because the main thing is, how are our students learning from when they've done wrong? What type of framework do we provide them so that they can learn and move forward? So we're talking about harassment, HIV harassment, and bullying. That is something that we need to focus on. And just saying suspension, whether it's in school, out of school, expulsion, those do not help us deal with those problems. We need to actually tackle those problems head on.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Whitleader.
Thank you. I'd like to push back a little bit on our fellow candidates. Our code of conduct, which was created in 2019, does have a very significant restorative justice lens to it. And I think it's something that a lot of people worked really hard on to make sure that we were introducing these practices into our code of conduct around suspensions. But that aside, this is a tremendously important issue and deserves to have the fullest participation of all stakeholders, including faculty, administration, students, and the community. Without even putting the issue on the agenda, the board passed this with zero input from all of these stakeholders. And this stealth action is a breathtaking example of how a board should never function. It's important that the district has a good policy on suspensions, whether it's adopted by the board or by the superintendent, but it should be well-researched with lots of participation to get buy-in from everyone. That's the right way to do it, and that wasn't the way it was done this week. And something that I would have encouraged or would have liked to have seen, if we had taken the time over the next month to really look at this policy. We've had 4 suspensions. Let's look at those suspensions. Let's identify if they were warranted in the suspension, right? Do we sit down and actually look at what the practice was and how we could improve, where we may have gone wrong, so that we can understand what warrants a suspension in our district, and then also use our code of conduct that we have that enforces that restorative justice lens to work with these students in a more constructive way. I think that's something that we could have spent more time in looking at, and that could have been an opportunity for our board to come together as a team to do that work. Sorry about that before.
That's okay, thank you. And candidate Rodriguez.
Thanks for the question. To be candid, I didn't come here to tap dance with y'all. I'm confused. This is an affront to the community, to the teachers, the administrators, and everyone that put in their hard work into creating the code of conduct and restorative justice policy. Let me get that out of the way. It's just another form of bullying. It's treating parents as obstacles. Okay, it's treating other board members as obstacles, and it's treating all of the stakeholders as obstacles. I mean, I just don't understand how this is better, the moratorium on suspensions, than what we had. And since I don't understand what said number of suspensions in this time period means compared to last year, I really can't provide those answers. I have more questions than answers, but usually when I go about these things, I underwrite them. I look at what has happened in a period of time compared to the same period of time last year. I dig into the root cause of things. I think what we do really well in this community is window dress, but we don't really get to the root cause of the issues. What is going on? And why are we not being aware that these kids are coming off the sidelines of remote learning, their parents being laid off, unemployment, other issues in the home? We should expect and be prepared for when these kids rematriculate, that they're going to have trauma, and we should be armed to help them. Okay, now listen, nobody wants to see more Black kids get suspended, especially not me, because that doesn't help them. But I also don't think this moratorium on suspensions helps them either.
Okay, thank you. Question number 5. Last year, someone else is joining. Let me just let them in. Last year, 2020, 2021, the board communicated to the community that HEPA filters were installed throughout district classrooms. This was not the case, as our current antiquated ventilation systems are not or were not able to even support them. In the same safety vein, the district purchased thousands of dollars of N95 masks, and only the nurses have been supplied with them. Teachers and support staff have not. In light of these aberrations, how do you propose to rebuild trust between staff, community, and the Board of Education? And candidate Telesford, you're up first.
I think at the end of this, it all comes to policy and having some sort of framework. If you are purchasing items for your staff and it doesn't reach your staff, then you realize you have some sort of hiccup in your system. And that usually happens because you did not have a policy in place that will ensure distribution to everybody. So I think one of the main things that the district can do is make sure it has policies in place at every level, so that teachers, staff, parents, board members, everyone has the adequate communication and understand what the actual procedure will be when we get these things. Communicating that you have purchased something is information, but the next thing is actually having a policy that helps you actually distribute that. And that's something that we should have that's clearly stated for everyone to follow and see.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Whitleader.
I think it's going to be a long and hard process to build back trust. You know, many children, our community, our kids were out of school for 18 months, and this year they're playing catch up and still feel underserved. So I know that the pandemic, as much as we're still in it, it seems far behind us, where our children are very much still experiencing the repercussions of lack of transparency, of communications that ultimately were false, right? You know, I think that we need to be better than that as a district. You are responsible for making sure that we are sharing what is true and that we are communicating and informing our community to help them make informed decisions, right? And so I think that's really, really important.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rodriguez.
Listen, trust is a very delicate thing, and once it's broken, it takes a lot of work to restore that. Installing a filter is a pretty objective act. You've either done it or you haven't. And if you haven't, you should be able to explain why you haven't. So to that extent, I think holding our district employees accountable for the responsibilities that they're charged with and that they're compensated to carry out is the first step. Second, we should have some property management protocols in place, whether it's a checklist or a plan to manage the properties to a high level. Something basically in writing that would drive behaviors that would avoid what has happened with this filter situation. Overall, I think it takes getting the right people into the right jobs, and that's going to take attracting the right talent into the district. But most importantly, it starts with leadership. If I make a decision that costs jobs, I'm probably going to be out of a job myself. And that's how my corporation restores faith in the shareholders that they're doing the right thing with their capital. I like to see the district do the right thing here and hold somebody accountable.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Vadlamani.
So this is one example where an evidence-based or a data-based decision-making or actually accountability would be very, very important. For example, we have many policies on the books, which are, they're good policies, right? They are being implemented and sometimes they're not. And how do we know whether something is getting done or not? So, and then this actually, I agree with Will, is that this is a very objective thing. This is not a subjective thing. Either things are installed or not installed. So if I was, on the board and I was looking to make some decision here, the easiest thing to do would be to have some level of a dashboard that shows you the problem is being solved or not. Like, for example, let me take a step back. We're doing the intentional integration plan right now. I mean, we started that. So the first year we're doing it. And our goal is that over the next few years, we should see each school look a lot like how our community looks or how our towns look. Now, one of the easiest ways to take care of that is to have a dashboard that shows percentage of the demographic percentages on that dashboard. And at one glance, we know whether things are being running the right way or not. Similarly, if we said that we want to take on a big project of changing every HEPA filter out in the school, well, put up a dashboard, 500 to be done, 200 done. Okay, so without even asking a question, I know it's not being done. So I think the feedback loop is missing in this whole thing, and that's where I think that putting up a very data-oriented view on what's happening would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. And Candidate Cuddle.
Thank you. Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Surely. Last year, 2020-2021, the board communicated to the community that HEPA filters were installed throughout the district classrooms. This was not the case, as our current antiquated ventilation systems were not or are not able to even support them. In the same safety vein, the district purchased thousands of N95 masks. Only the nurses have been supplied with them. Teachers or support staff have not. In light of these aberrations, how do you propose to rebuild trust between the staff, community, and the Board of Education?
Thank you for reading the question again. So when the pandemic started, things were fluid, and the guidance that was coming out from the CDC, coming down from the state, the directives and the emergency orders, our district created our Health and Wellness Task Force to help oversee with COVID protocols and best practices. And during that time, it was also recommended, as we all know, that filters would be best served in place. Now, I can't speak to specifics, again, because I'm a current board member, and that includes personnel questions, but I, speaking as an individual, our communication was dismal. It was not sufficient in regards to ensuring and building trust within the community around the practices of what happened with installing our filters, health and safety right now in the middle of a pandemic. But since that time, our district has had placement of air purifiers based upon negotiations with SUMEA, put in our offices and institutional across our classrooms. Our filters and other air purifying methods have gone out across the district in over 300 classrooms. And right now, as Monday night's meeting, we just, the board just hired our new facilities manager. So we finally have a new facilities manager in place to help us, and with our new BA who started last month, to be able to have better oversight around our district facilities and procedures. And also within our FFT meetings. I wasn't on FFT in the 2020 school year. I am on FFT now, and I can tell you that this month's FFT meeting, I did bring up the question of where are we at right now with air purifiers, with air vents, and that was a conversation we had in our FFT meeting that was uplifted by our FFT chairwoman, Ms. Wright, and continue to have these conversations to make sure that we're ensuring that all of our classrooms and spaces are efficient and safe and running within the best practices for all of our students, staff.
Okay, there's one point, Candidate Cuddle, you mentioned FFT. There may be people in the community that don't know what that means. Could you just clarify that, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. So the board has committees, and all of us serve on committees, and FFT is one of the committees I stand on as a board member, which stands for Facilities, Finance, and Technology. And as a committee, we meet to review those everything within the district, within those parameters, within our committee.
Great, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that, and better to come from someone that knows what that is than me. Okay, all righty, moving on to question number 6. Do you think the elementary school integration plan should be revised in any way to support an appeal process for families who find the plan difficult to manage in terms of family life issues such as childcare concerns before and after school care, the ability to support transport across town before and after school, or conflict for parents that are working? And Candidate Whitleader, would you take that first, please?
Thank you. First, I just wanted to say that I think across all of these questions, a common theme that keeps coming up is just our inability to have proper communications. And I guess my question is, if we're having these communication failures, why aren't we changing that if we're recognizing that we're failing the community in that way? So I just wanted to quickly say that. But with regards to the intentional integration plan, I don't think that we should view this plan as something that's stagnant. I think that it's something that we can continue to evolve over time. We need to, again, engage all key stakeholders and think about the infrastructure of the plan to make sure that it's seamless, that it's operating functionally, that we have metrics in place to measure the outcomes in these schools. It's extremely important, but I don't think that when you make a decision that you have to stick with that decision as far as how something should be done, and not evolve that over time as our community evolves. So I do think that there's always room for improvement in anything in life. And so we should constantly, especially this year, because we just onboarded it, we should be asking ourselves what's working, what's not, and how do we make it better? And I think at the end of the day, that will be what is of most importance to our students, because they'll benefit from having something that is, as close to perfect as we can get it.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Vadlamani.
The intentional integration plan is currently happening. I mean, the decision was made a couple of years back, and we are in the process of implementing it. And one of the things that has always concerned me, through this process, is that it took us many election cycles to get to this point, to kind of get it on board and make it happen. And if you don't get it right, it'll take many more election cycles to kind of fix it. So I think the current, all the candidates who are going to get onto the board, this board is going to have it's on the board to make sure that this is implemented correctly, right? So one thing, again, I spoke about briefly before this, is that we should be able to have some way of measuring what the success criteria is. So we need to have some very clear metrics that say, this is what, if we hit these metrics, it is a success, or maybe it is not. I mean that will be very clear. And those metrics should be published and tracked. And so, I know you gave a couple of examples on should these individual things be looked after or not, is that they should be. And in fact, we should also revisit the algorithm, because we don't want to be in the business, we meaning, the board should not be in the business of actually valuing a house that is an exception and that remains an exception all through. So we need to ensure that it is evenly done, and the algorithm truly is, I guess, random in a way where you cannot kind of game the algorithm, right? So those are my two things. Success criteria, have a very easy way of getting accountability, and data-driven kind of view of the implementation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
I have to find my mute button. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you for the question. So with our intentional integration plan, so I give credit where credit's due. It was Dr. Taylor's idea to uncouple the integration plan from our long-range facility plan to start now with this incoming kindergarten class, knowing that the hard work ahead in order to fully see our vision of truly desegregating our schools and creating a true equity across our school communities. The integration plan is a living document, actually. So it's an ongoing living document that the district and the board reviewed. Recently, our most recent CNI meeting for September, and we just had a public CNI meeting, Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting in October. We got an update from Dr. Friedman and Dr. Perez, and talking about the intentional integration work. And it's being reviewed. So it's an ongoing living document to see exactly, look under the hood, what's working, what's not working. What we do know is working right now, that it's already made an impact to really ensure and diversify our student body, and really are truly breaking down those barriers of segregation and those red lines across our community. And we see that that's already happening in real time. As we move forward, as we look at this integration plan and our functioning, we've had conversations on the board and in our committees about best ways to support parents and families, either through the parenting center. We've talked about other ways of supporting students, at one point even potentially getting a jitney and partnering with the township of Maplewood for their jitneys, to looking into other alternatives to ensure that this intentional integration plan is something that is not going to oppress our families, but is going to help our families be able to get to the schools and services that they need to continue, again, this deep integration work. And I also want to mention that the district does have a dashboard on our website. If you go to our district website, we do have a dashboard that talks more in depth about an integration portal and plan. And the district and through the Board of Education will continue to update in our committee meetings on this effort as we document it.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Telesford.
I think the important thing with the intentional integration initiative is that, from what I've seen or spoken to, and lots of parents, they are happy with the program. But we should always take the input of those that are experiencing hardship. And I think, as Arun and I have discussed, it's all about having those metrics and looking at what works and what doesn't work, and make your adjustments based on that. Because this is going to be a student body that changes every year, we have to optimize this algorithm every year. And we should also consider some of the hardships that some parents are having, while ensuring that we do maintain a diverse student body. So I think we should always be taking in the input from parents, and taking into any issues they have, and seeing how do we optimize the algorithm to lessen those burdens, if they have any. I guess the most important thing is that we make sure that we have benchmarks. And the most important thing is that our children, and looking at their trajectories, are going to be the most important thing for this initiative.
Okay, thank you. And Candidate Rodriguez.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to give a response and then point everyone to my campaign page on Facebook for more details. So I want to go on the record as saying I support this plan, but I do not support the algorithm. First and foremost, to answer your question directly, this plan is completely overlooking some of the logistical sensitivities that affect working families and families that have children in the district that are responsible for caring for younger siblings and elders. It is a very insensitive program. And it also lacks awareness. And I'm going to show you how. We have, as of October 15th, we have about 6,000 students in the district, of which maybe 1,800 are of color. We just don't have the critical mass to pull this off according to the algorithm. The algorithm takes into consideration race, parental income, parental education, distance, and socioeconomic factors. But socioeconomic factors not defined in the algorithm. Just bear in mind, this is supposed to be based on the Berkeley method, which has fewer factors and has been overlaid to much larger districts. So numerically, we just can't get to diversity unless we include everyone's identity. And that goes way beyond the algorithm. We need to consider things like religion. We need to consider things like sexual preference, the sexual orientation of parents. I mean, if the goal is to have a school district that represents the diversity of the town, then we're missing about 80% of the town in the algorithm. And this thing needs to be rethought. And I question why we're implementing this now when 2 schools are under construction, which basically cuts out about 30% of the population. Sorry about that, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. On to question 7, and full disclosure here, I taught in the Maplewood South Orange School District for 25 years and retired out of our district. So this question is very near and dear to my heart. So full disclosure on this. Question 7. South Orange Maplewood School District has a teacher retention crisis. Every year, for the past several years, between 60 and 80 teachers leave their positions, to include teachers who are tenured. Job satisfaction, low morale, and compensation are significant factors that influence this attrition. Additionally, looking at neighboring districts, SOMSD significantly lags behind West Orange, Montclair, and Milburn. In fact, an SOMSD educator with a master's degree plus 30 additional credits is currently paid less than what a master's degree plus 30 credit teacher was paid in Milburn 11 years ago. Specifically, how will you, 1, increase job satisfaction for our teachers? 2, raise morale. 3, raise salaries to be commensurate with neighboring districts. That was a long question. If you would like for me to repeat it again when it gets to your turn, I will gladly do that. Candidate Telesford, can you please take a stab at that first?
Okay. I think one way to, I guess, raise morale or to build your teachers is to try to essentially build your teachers by meeting their needs. So that means higher salaries, but also having ways that, I guess, they are rewarded for success. How are their students doing? And have rewards for that. Also provide more mentorship so that you are building, I guess, you're on a team as a teacher. You're not just an individual teacher in the school. You're essentially joining a family. So you want to have mentors within the school that can help retain those teachers. Also consider their voices too. they're not just people you tell them what to do. They're dealing with students every single day. So allowing them to have their input in some of the policies that we're using in the classroom is also very important. And
Thank you. Were you done? I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
oh no, that's all.
Thank you. Candidate with leader.
I think a lot of what teachers are facing are the same things that community members are facing, where there is just a lack of communication and support, right? So I think that our administration could do a better job of listening to our teachers, engaging with them, understanding what their challenges are. I know that we need to be doing a better job of investing in professional development opportunities. I know one of the focuses this upcoming year and one of the district goals is really focusing on that teacher growth. And I think in order to get teacher growth and development, we definitely need to start first making them feel supported in the district and valued. Last year, the pandemic in our school district, it basically became the school district versus the teachers. And we only ever heard those stories that were negative, right? What was written about in the media. And then to have conversations with teachers that talked about how they were making house calls, doing phone calls with students to help them with reading. Why aren't we sharing those stories? And why aren't we celebrating those moments where teachers go above and beyond for our children? Those are things that I think are extremely important. And I sat down with someone who's been in the district for 10 years, and he talked about when he first started, there was a new teacher roundtable. So you were almost like an incoming class of teachers. You sat down together, you met several times a year, and you talked about what the experience was like. And you built that camaraderie and that morale with your fellow colleagues. From what he said, it doesn't sound like that still happens. And these are things that when it comes to culture, and we want our teachers, our good teachers, to be here and build a legacy, we need to make sure that they feel supported, not only by administration, but by their peers too. So I think there's a lot more that we could be doing to create that climate and culture in our district. And, our student body is only as good as our teachers. We need to make sure we're investing in them so that they can hopefully provide a brighter future for all of our children.
Okay. Thank you. Candidate Vadlamani.
The first thing that we need to be aware of, and I'm sure we are, is that teachers are probably of all the stakeholders, teachers are in contact with our children every day. And that's probably the most direct impact they have on the well-being of our children. And, in kind of extrapolating that well-being of our school districts and our town. So clearly they're extremely important in the ecosystem. So now instead of looking at their growth as only as one part, which is compensation, we need to be looking at compensation, job satisfaction, professional development, and the respect within the system, right? So all of those things together is the package that we should be looking at. I know you give an example of, the salaries at Milburn. I don't know if you can necessarily compete with something like a Milburn, but so that is something to be looked at. And one thing that we need to make sure is I guess maybe it is obvious, maybe it's obvious to some people, is that initially the longevity of the superintendent is very important, the stability. We need to have a superintendent who is there for a longer period of time, who can engage with the teachers and everyone else to ensure that the policies are being followed. If we have someone new coming in every year, obviously it takes a while before they get to work each other and start respecting each other. So that's my view on how to engage with all the teachers.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rodriguez.
Thanks for the question. I can tell you that if we keep passing policies like the moratorium on suspensions, we are not going to attract the top talent to our district. A safe environment, a respectful environment, an environment that gives feedback to employees and works to develop them is important to retaining and attracting the best talent. It's no secret that job satisfaction is not directly tied to compensation, although compensation is the driving factor in some cases for people to accepting an offer. It's not the reason they always stay. People leave managers. They leave their supers or whatever the equivalent is in academia. People leave people. They don't leave jobs. People stay with people when they're satisfied and when they're engaged and when they're respected. From a compensation standpoint, I would work really hard to dig in the budget to see where there's waste and try to divert that waste into comp for our teachers. When I look at the budget, which is roughly $159 million, we're spending about $27,000 per student. Where is that money going? And why are we not allocating some of that increase? We have a 1% increase in the budget with a 2% increase in enrollment. Why are we not earmarking some of those funds towards our teachers? Also, I think 360 feedback is important, and we need to listen to teachers. Listen, I've been subject to 360 feedbacks from my employees, and let me tell you, it has straightened me out. It has made me a better leader and a more thoughtful person. We need to listen to teachers. They should be reviewing their managers just as they're being reviewed as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And candidate Cuddle.
Thank you for the question. And if I may just take a point of privilege, Ms. Ryan, thank you for your service as an educator in our community. I know it's a thankless job. I mean, I've been an educator and working in communities for over 20 years, and the passion and my heart drives everything I do for students first. And for our teachers, they are our heart and passion that drive everything that we do. They are the heart of our district that breathe in the light that lead our students into the directions where they can thrive inside and outside our classrooms. Teacher retention is an issue that's happening across the state of New Jersey. It's happening across the country, especially now during COVID. Our teachers sacrificed so much during COVID. Family sacrifice, professional sacrifice, in order to ensure that our students' educational needs were still being met online and offline and hybrid in so many different ways. Our school district, within the board in our September meeting, we did update our district goals. And at our board meeting this week, the district also to the public showed that the district goals and outline teacher retention, more professional development, more opportunities to uplift our teachers from within, being able to invest with team cohorts, be able to invest in having guiding leadership to support teachers, especially new teachers that come into our district for the first time. We examined and I looked at our HR manual. We looked at how we're doing our listing for teachers to be a more inclusive, not just with gender identity, but inclusive language within our hiring practices, and to ensure that we're showing that we are a welcoming, affirming community for our teachers. Our teachers deserve so much credit for everything that they've done to keep our school district afloat during this pandemic. Deserve more.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll insert my 2 cents here, since I no longer work here, but I do live here still and plan to still be here. And my plug is that the strength of this district rests upon the teachers. And I think I believe that when I started here, and I believe that now. So thank you for your kind words. And believe it or not, we are at the final question. And I would, interject right now and say thank you to all of you, because a very comprehensive list of questions were developed, and we thank you so much for your time. So with that, let us go to our final question before our closing statements. Question 8, positivity is great, and wanting to run on all positive ideas is laudable. But what about our school district's failure or failures that spurred you to run for this position? What specifically will you do to remediate the issue or issues you have addressed or identified? And candidate Vadlamani, you are up first.
So I will admit that I'm a a natural born optimist. Okay. So, so right there, you kind of disqualify half my question, but I think that the district and our towns are doing pretty well. I mean, yes, we've been through some terrible times. We went through a pandemic, but I mean, if you think about it, 100 years back, we went through a pandemic across the whole, worldwide, and then we had these world wars. Compared to all that, we are doing okay. One of the metrics that I'm looking at is the number of people or CHS graduates who go out and come back in, like Kwavi has done. I mean, I met so many people in the last, while I was campaigning and, kind of looking at this position, that it makes me feel better actually. Okay. But yes, granted that it is all going well, a couple of things that would really, really help out. I mean, one thing I definitely look at, again, going back to our information flow and understanding, we just need to have information that is distilled and given to us easily. Information needs to be in multiple different media, multiple different formats, and sometimes even something as simple as a printed paper works better than any fancy email. So we need to have all types of information coming through, and we need to trust that people who have been on the board before, who will be on the board now and in the future, are actually doing good. I mean, one of the things I've heard is that, oh, they're doing a bad job, they're doing a terrible job, the administration is doing a bad job. But I mean, everybody is coming from a good place, and so we need to respect that. So I'm going to leave it at that. But
Okay, thank you. And candidate Telesford.
Okay, one of the reasons why I got into this race was I started following what was going on in the district a few years ago when they had a vote on de-leveling, because that was something that affected me directly. When I was in middle school, I had good grades, but then I was put into lower levels, and it was only because my grades were much higher than everybody else's they moved me up. And so I saw that as a deficiency that the district had, but when they voted to de-level, I saw that as a very positive change. And of course, I know that's not where it ends. There is still a lot of work to do, because the fact that we've de-leveled doesn't mean that the structure or what classes students take will change overnight. And I want to jump in because I wanted to bring my mindset, which is a scientific background, to the board. And I think one of the main things that we can do is how we communicate that. And that is about articulate a vision, use data to back that up, and distill it down in ways that is digestible for the public, that shows that we're making progress on all these things. And of course, the big thing is that the district is a good district. That's why many of us moved back here. And throughout my whole time canvassing, I've just been seeing so many people that are CHS alumni that I went to school with, or they were years before me or after me. And I think we do have a very positive district. And I think the positive thing is that we do see our problems, and then we just try to improve on them.
Thank you. Candidate Rodriguez.
Suzanne, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question for me? My wife asked me if I had dinner yet via text, and it just completely distracted me. Apologies.
Sure. Let me repeat it for you. No problem. Positivity is great, and wanting to run on all positive ideas is laudable. But what about our school district's failure or failures that spurred you to run for this position? What specifically will you do to remediate the issue you have, remediate the issue or issues?
And did you have dinner?
And did you have dinner? Yeah.
No, I need to do a better job of that. I didn't have dinner before the last debate, and that's why I'm so hangry, for lack of a better term. So I'll do better next time. So, I'm not here to, shed any more attention to failures of the district. I want to talk about why I entered this race. I come from a very challenged background, and I'm only here because people have pulled me up. And what I've committed to those people is that I would do the same for others and pay it forward. So that's the primary reason why I'm in this race. I'm always looking for opportunities to match people with development opportunities that are going to help them attain meaningful employment or launch businesses, or just help them round themselves out overall. The other reason why I'm in this race is because I worked extremely hard to get into Maplewood. And I live down the block from South Mountain. And when I found out about the intentional integration program and the fact that my Afro-Latino kids may not go to school down the street from my house, I was incensed, but I did the research and I understood why we needed to have this program, and I support it. And I think we can do it eloquently. I think we can do it exquisitely. We can do a better job if we continuously improve, but we need to understand what it is that we're trying to improve. No more window dressing, and let's get to root causes, and let's understand why we're pushing policy. Okay, because policy doesn't drive behavior, and policy doesn't drive results. People drive results, and that's why I'm getting involved in this race.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
Thank you for the question. So I do want to start off by saying, like, one of the greatest things about our district is our students and our student leaders, who are phenomenal, and they do so many great things. And that's one of the best things about our district is our students and our student leaders. But it's the environment and the systems to ensure that they're becoming their best selves that are challenged in our district and in our community. When I originally ran 3 years ago for the Board of Education, I ran because there was wanting to create the foundation of a base point about access and equity, but driving policies, because policies are the foundational board work that we do. Being able to create long-range data collection and work on our crumbling buildings and facilities. Our students need to feel seen and heard and feel safe and welcome across our classrooms and our communities. And during that time, why I'm seeking re-election is to continue that work, that momentum of us moving forward, the work that we need to do collectively, the work that we need to do together in order to build towards 21st century learning. Now, over the time before I got involved in the district, as a board member, I was already working with our district in tandem on the parenting board of the Parenting Center, working to help build as one of the original co-founders of Cougar Cares to fight food insecurity, work on the prom pop-up shop, work with our student leaders, develop our student leaders, and being able to help create change in our community. And why I got involved in the other side, being on the Board of Education, was because I saw ways to not just point fingers and say what's wrong, but to bring solutions. Be proactive, being solution-oriented, be a problem solver that I am, to be able to help create the systems in place that we need collectively as a board to move forward. And that is one of the reasons why our district is facing challenges, but it's a great district that does so many amazing things that we don't hear enough about.
Okay, thank you. Okay, believe it or not, folks, we just made it through 8 questions.
I didn't answer the last one.
No, you're so,
that's okay.
I apologize. I didn't double cross you on my little.
I know. No,
Thank you. I think maybe I'm feeling like you guys must feel a little bit overwhelmed at this point, and I think William's comment about no dinner. So let me apologize. And yes, candidate
keeping it longer than they wanted to be on the call. So
please go. Sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. So why I have gotten involved was really paying attention to the board meetings, and it really comes down to one thing, and that's students. Listening to these meetings where students have come forward and talked about sexual assault allegations, meetings where teachers actually came on to advocate for students Maplewood Middle School students who were getting to school hungry because they didn't have a bus and walking close to 2 miles and not being able to learn because they were hungry and having to wear a mask and, having to wait until it was lunch to eat. That is something to me that is just an injustice that's occurring that we don't have solutions for. There's an achievement gap that has plagued our district for so long. We had a student who was killed on school property last year. There's students with special needs who are just completely being ignored. And we learned that in the Monday Board of Education meeting. I'm not okay unless all of our kids are okay. And I want to do the work because I want every child to feel safe, have every opportunity to just come to school and just focus on learning and having a good time. And I think right now there's so many other things that are impacting our children's day to day that their mental well-being is at risk. And I don't think it should take teachers coming to a board meeting or parents having to come and advocate for their children, for this administration, for this Board of Education to wake up and do the right thing for our kids. And I want to be that force for positive change. And that's why I'm running for the Board of Ed.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I apologize. All right, so now, candidates, you'll have some time to put together your closing statements to share with the community. And I would like to share with you, I don't know if you can see, but we have 84 participants tonight. So that shows how wonderful it is that our community members care so much. So with that, Candidate Vodlamani, would you like to have your closing statements at this time?
Thank you for, I work on a bank. We write algorithms, software. So in software, we have a saying that it costs $1 to fix a bug that's found in development. It costs like $100 to fix it during internal testing, and like a staggering $1,000 if the customer finds a bug. So essentially, the earlier you identify a potential problem in a program, the earlier you can fix it before it causes expensive damage. Now, this is the approach that I'll bring to the Board of Education. I'm interested in examining information and finding the areas that need to be changed and achieve the desired outcomes. So my facility with data and empirical information allow me to spot bugs and recommend creative ways of thinking about those issues. I love this community. My family has lived here for over 18 years. My children have known no other home, nor another school district. They're growing up to be responsible global citizens. Therefore, I'm honored to put myself forward to serve on the BOE. If elected, I hope to round out the board's collective knowledge with my practical approach to problem solving. I have the conviction, temperament, time, and the energy to get meaningful work done. So in our district, we've had some wins and some losses over the last few years. Still, I'm an optimist. I believe that the most significant victories for our school district are yet to come. We should look forward to being the beacon for other school districts nationwide in having an equitable, fully integrated, high-performing, and a harmonious school district. I want to thank the organizers of this debate and my fellow candidates for participating. I hope that I have put forward my framework for a process-driven and a practical decision-making along with my beliefs and views with passion and energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate with leader.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Hilton Neighborhood Association, for hosting tonight's debate and for asking really challenging questions. I actually much prefer not to have the questions ahead of time because then you overthink it. So it was just refreshing to have this open dialogue with all of the candidates today. But I am committed to doing what's necessary to see change and positive outcomes for our students. I believe that I personally can bring TLC, transparency, leadership, and collaboration to this Board of Education. And I know that I will be more than good intentions. And I would just be honored if I had this community's vote on November 2nd. Truly, this has been an incredible experience going door to door, meeting so many of you, hearing your stories. You've just prepared me for what I know will be a huge commitment, but I'm dedicated to doing that work. And you've only fueled my inspiration and motivation to do this. So thank you so much. And hopefully, I know there's only a week and a half left, so hopefully I'll meet you in person soon.
Thank you so much. Candidate Rodriguez.
I want to say thank you to the Hilton Neighborhood Association, my fellow candidates, and my neighbors. This has been an inspiring process, and I've been humbled to hear your stories and to tell you mine. My goal, whether I'm elected or not, is to drive more participation in this process by parents and the community. Whether you have children in the district or not, your tax dollars show up to the district every day, and you need to understand how that money is spent and what effect decisions make in the long term. You know, I'm a little bit concerned when I read about, I follow trends, and I see people moving from major metropolitan areas to secondary and tertiary cities because the cost of living is lower and the available educational options are much better. I don't want Maplewood, South Orange to become the latest tragedy because of these trends. There are people on, I'm going to say there are people in this community that are well-intentioned, but only you know what's best for your kids. And it's up to you to get involved. You are the biggest driver of children's success, and you can only do that in partnership with your teachers in the district. So get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Cuddle.
Thank you. And thank you again to the Hilton Neighborhood Association and for our greater beloved community for joining us tonight in these important conversations. When I ran for the Board of Education 3 years ago, I said we needed to move the district forward, that we needed to build upon the foundation to address access and equity, systems, policies, data collection, and our crumbling, outdated infrastructure, and address our district leadership. Since joining the Board of Education, I have worked to establish a foundation to move us to act on pivotal next steps and moving forward together to continue the important hard work of building the frameworks, infrastructure, and the pathways towards 21st century learning. We must maintain our momentum and we must keep students at the center of all of our purpose and all that we do. If we lose sight of our board's purpose, function, and goals, if we don't have a lens to our students first, if we don't have compassionate, dedicated, knowledgeable, diverse, and collaborative board members at the table, it will all derail. Our once-in-a-generation facilities plan, moving SMSD to 21st century learning, moving towards a truly caring community, building welcoming, inclusive schools for all of our students to thrive inside and outside of the classrooms. If we fail to make sure good on these promises, it will be our students who will suffer, our next generation of leaders. Over the past 2.5 years on the board, I have a proven record of service showing my deep commitment to our students and quality inclusion and our district across our beloved community. Moving forward, our classrooms and hallways should mirror and reflect all of our diverse families, students, and our community in our classrooms, including our teachers, staff, district leadership, and yes, including members of the Board of Education. This work is not done in a silo, but done in leadership and collaboration with like-minded board members like myself at the table, working with our board and district. This is important hard work, and it's only possible with being an informed board member, leading with a student lens and equity focus, and understanding how to create bridges moving forward together. As Audre Lorde said, there's no such thing as single issue struggle because we not live single issue lives. I hope to continue the work and be reelected, and I hope I have your vote on November 2nd.
Thank you. And candidate Telesford.
I'd just like to thank the Hilton Neighborhood Association. And I also like to just thank the candidates and also all my neighbors that I've been visiting throughout this campaign. My favorite thing is seeing all the people that I've gone to school with and also the people that have graduated before and after. It tells you something about this community. It's a really special community. We come back because we love this community. And part of that is because we love the school system that we have here. So when I think about the school system overall, the BOE has to they need to articulate a vision. And to do that, you need a board that is collaborative. And what I'd like to bring to the board is our motto, which is excellence, action, and accountability. Excellence, we want to use evidence-based outcomes. We want to use data. I'm a scientist. I'm all about the evidence, and that's what I will bring to the table. I want to pour over all that research and then use those as our policies and curriculum that we implement. Action, get things done, work together. It's very important that we work as a team, but the most important part about working as a team is the idea that we listen to each other. Listening to each other allows us to collaborate and move forward on our goals. And finally, accountability. Data is our accountability. We need to be able to communicate with the public very clearly and show them, are we reaching our goals? Where are we deficient? How do we improve? Our data holds us accountable, and we must be accountable to the public and also to ourselves. And I'm running with Arun. He's also a data-driven guy, and we hope that if you vote for both of us, we can bring that technical mindset to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I give the meeting back to Mary, our president, as your moderator this evening, it was a pleasure being here with you this evening. I so respected how you respected one another, and that is a tribute to each of you. So thank you so much for giving us the Hilton Neighborhood Association, and our community at large the opportunity to hear you express your views in such clear, concise fashion. So thank you, thank you so much. It was my pleasure to be your moderator. Mary, I would like to hand the meeting back to you. And John, thank you for being timekeeper.
Thank you, Suzanne. Again, thank you to all of the candidates here. It was a really interesting, informative meeting. And John, thank you for keeping time so well as you do. And Suzanne, of course, for moderating this evening. I know that I've learned a lot of stuff here tonight, and it's given me some thought when I go to vote on November 2nd, Tuesday. Very important. My bumper sticker says voting matters, and it does. So this evening has given us a chance to make some choices in our own mind as far as what we're looking for in our school board members. I'd like to just say Hilton Neighborhood Association loves new members. If you're not a member, we welcome everyone. You can send us an email at hna.maplewood@gmail.com or our webpage, hnamaplewood.com. Oh, okay. It's all there. And again, I want to remind you, we're having a Halloween parade at DeHart Park on Halloween from 3 to 4 o'clock. And our next meeting is so excitingly going to be in person at DeHart on November 18th, which means I can't be wearing my sweatpants. So we're really looking forward to, and we will have there Detective Stephen Giamatti, who is with the Maplewood Police Department and the Community Service Bureau. So we hope to see many of you there. Thank you everyone for a wonderful evening. Let me just make sure I didn't forget anything important. No, I think that's it. Thanks all. Have a wonderful night and go eat dinner, Will.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.